Today, I wanted to do something a little bit different, and that is I was scrolling on my phone and I came across a story or an article in the BBC Science Focus magazine in their well-being section. And the title was How to Not Raise a Narcissist According to Science. Subtitle was Parents Naturally Want Their Children to Feel Special, but showering them with praise can sometimes do more harm than good. So I want to dive into this a little bit. I am interested in reading sort of mainstream pop news articles about narcissism because part of my purpose in this, in my own journey and sharing with you guys, is busting up some of the misconceptions about narcissism and what it really is about. And so we're going to go through this. But before we do, make sure you subscribe, give some thumbs up, likes, comment below. If you have any questions, what do you think about what I'm about to say? All that kind of good stuff. Make sure you do that. I love conversing with you guys. Having that ongoing conversation, and those comments is where we can do that. All right, so I have the article here pulled up on my screen. Obviously you can't see it, but I'm gonna read a couple parts and then give my input or my take on it. So it was saying that a growing body of research suggests that children can develop narcissistic traits at the other extreme of upbringing, meaning as opposed to abuse, neglect, or harsh environments. And this is when they're placed on a pedestal, showered with praise, and told they're more special than everyone else. So, how do well-meaning parents encourage healthy confidence without tipping into overpraise that fuels narcissism? And what does the science actually say about where narcissism comes from? So, obviously, they want to get your attention. They want parents to read this and start to wonder, am I turning my kid into a narcissist? Now, I do want to say that they are very casual with using narcissism or narcissistic personality disorder and narcissistic traits. Now, those are two different things. They exist in the same universe, but every single one of us has some level of narcissistic traits. It's actually a normal part of development. I'm not a child development specialist, but I do know that there are certain stages along the way where it's healthy and proper development to really consider, how does this affect me, and bring your attention inward and have some narcissistic traits. And it's really a spectrum, and everyone lands somewhere along that spectrum. This end being like full on, the most extreme narcissistic personality disorder person you've ever met, and over here being like, those people that are praised in our culture, Mother Teresa, Gandhi, etc. So we all fall somewhere along those. We all have some level of narcissistic traits, and we should, because if we didn't, we would not look to take care of ourselves, which is an important part of the whole, like that's popular now too, right? Like all the self-care stuff. So they're talking about, when you talk about narcissistic traits, you could be anywhere on this spectrum. But when you're talking about narcissistic personality disorder, true narcissist, you're over here, you're way on this end of the spectrum. So anyhow, let's dive in a little further. So they talked about a 2015 study published in the PNAS, followed 565 Dutch children aged 7 to 12, tracking how parental behavior shaped their self-views. The researchers, led by Professor Eddie Brumelem of the University of Amsterdam, tested two theories. Did narcissism emerge from parents being too cold and unloving, sort of what they call the psychoanalytic view, or from parents overvaluing their child, treating them as more special and entitled than others? They call that the social learning view. And this article says, the results were clear. Narcissism was predicted by parental overvaluation, not a lack of warmth. Now, I went to the actual study and I looked through it, and I started to get a little bit, I don't know. Anyway, the point is there's some aspects of it that perhaps a researcher would disagree with me on, but they're a little bit fuzzy around the edges. And I guess that goes with any psychological, research, because it all has to be reported or self-reported or surveys or things like that. So it immediately becomes a bit unscientific, in the sense that if you're, testing how a chemical treats, if like an animal takes a chemical, what happens, that's more analytical. You can measure the amount of chemical, you can measure what happens in their body, and so forth. And this psychological research always involved some subjectivity. So that was sort of my first red flag with this. It's like, well, okay, so how are they determining the parents giving too much, overvaluing their child or treating them more special and entitled than others? And how are they standardizing that? And I know they had some methods of standardizing it, but it was still a bit fuzzy, like I said. So uh, what they said here is children whose parents consistently describe them as exceptional or deserving special treatment were more likely to develop inflated, fragile self-views, believing themselves superior, but also craving constant validation. By contrast, genuine parental warmth, affection, appreciation, love was linked to healthy self-esteem, not narcissism. Now I could have told you that. If you've been watching this channel, or if you're versed in narcissism and how it develops, what happens is in childhood, in those developmental stages, we get basically two contrasting messages. On the one hand, you're given a message that you're special, unique in some way. And on the other hand, you're given a message that you're worthless, valueless, and unworthy of any kind of love. So it, of course, makes sense that genuine parental warmth, you wouldn't be getting the message of that you have no value and you're not worthy of being loved, because you're getting affection, appreciation, and loved. So, to look at just one end of that spectrum, or just the other end of that spectrum, but not really understand that it's a combination of those two things that really creates the narcissist personality disorder, is really missing the boat to some degree. And so they talk about, they give some examples in this article, like if, your kid does good in school, they get a good grade, and you tell them, I'm so proud of you, that somehow that statement is going to create a narcissist out of your child. Now, I think this is, typical pop media, alarmists try to, say statements that'll get your attention and make you worried about it and stuff, if parents overdote. But the thing is that it happens when you're given that message in combination with the message of the unworthy of being loved. Just getting the message of that your parent is so proud of you, or your parent telling you how special and great you are, does not necessarily create a narcissist. It really requires the other. So it got me wondering, how many of these parents that they were watching, when they do the things like, I'm so proud of you for getting a good grade, or tell their kid how special they are, what's the other end of that spectrum in their lives? The ones that turn into true narcissist personality disorder, I would bet you $100 that they're getting also the message, whether it's conscious or unconscious, that they are not loved, they're not worthy of love, or not valued. And so, like for me in my story, the specialness, that message really came because I was really good at school and intellectual pursuits. And my mom, who was sort of the narcissistic matriarch of the family, that was something that she really values, or is, I guess. And, being intellectually smart, that was something, I don't want to get into her story, but basically that was something that she holds a high value in and is really important to her. So the fact that I showed that aptitude, I got praise for that. Now, I didn't get a lot of I'm so proud of you. That was just never part of the upbringing or the family system. But so a lot of it was unspoken, but it was certainly, attention towards good grades, and that, I would get these notes home from teachers when I was younger, elementary school, junior high, like, Brad's really good and smart, and if he just applied himself more, he would be a straight A student. And so those are the type of things that they would then tell me. Oh, your teachers keep saying this, just apply yourself more. And so even though it wasn't like, you're so smart and you're so great, it was, the messaging was that was of utmost importance. And that was something that I was good at. And not only was I good at it, but I was so good at it that I didn't even have to try hard, and people still saw that I was good at it. So I learned that was something important in a place where I held value in the eyes of my parents. But on the other hand, I got, again, unconscious. I didn't get parents who like hit me or told me I was, useless or worthless or anything like that with words, but it was more with actions. And so there was essentially no physical affection in my household. I can't really remember being held by either of my parents, being hugged by them, except, at obligatory times, like, not even obligatory times, like the most bare minimum of obligatory times, like when I graduated high school or something like that. And there were other people around to see that, my parents would hug me. But never any of that. When I see in TV shows and movies, people, snuggling up with their mom. Or I was at a fair the other week, and the people in front of me in line, it was a mom and a teenage daughter, and they were kind of like hugging each other and stuff. And I was like, God, that's so foreign. That was really never part of it. And so even though I wasn't told with words, you're not valuable, you're not worthy of being loved, it was more the withholding of that important nurturing that gave me that message. So I think that a person, if they were to get good nurturing from their parents, attention, affection, true, um, all of that stuff, truly nurturing, not just an act, but really happening, even if their parent was then telling them how great and special they are, I do not believe they would turn into a narcissist. This is sort of just a sort of throwing a dart at something, and so I just want to say that. So let's read a little bit more. Gotta get down here a little bit further down the thing here. Spotting early warning signs. Can you tell if a child is developing narcissistic traits? Again, narcissistic traits versus personality disorder. Psychologists caution against diagnosing personality disorders in children as personalities only fully consolidate later, typically in adolescence. Obviously a big problem with this study in the first place. But Mazzella says you can see hallmarks much earlier. These include extreme sensitivity to criticism and constant need to be center of attention. So I would also postulate that just telling your child they're special, but also then supporting them and giving them real good nurturing and attention would not make them have a hypersensitivity to criticism. The hypersensitivity to criticism comes from being told how special and great you are, but then not being given any of that nurturing or love, or be given the message that you're unworthy of being loved. Then you're really sensitive to criticism because you've created a false self that only is valued if you're doing the thing that is seen as valuable. Like in my story, doing good at school. But if I'm doing anything else, or if I fail at school, then that one thing that I could hang my identity on is gone. And that does create that hypersensitivity to criticism. Beyond hypersensitivity, it becomes survival. And that's where the PTSD responses and so forth come from. So it's not, as this article points out, that that messaging of you're special that causes the problem. What it really is that messaging in lockstep with the messaging that you have no value and you're worthless. If you didn't have that, you most certainly would not develop narcissistic personality disorder. It just wouldn't happen that way. You really need both sides of that to create the false ego and the false sense of self that then you become unconscious to, and then go through life operating as a narcissist, trying to manipulate situations, manipulate people, and so forth, so they don't find out that secret, that bad story. If you had a good sense of self and thought you were special, you wouldn't be manipulating everybody to try to hide that unlovableness. You might be saying how great you are because you think you are, and really, frankly, there's kind of nothing wrong with that. It doesn't lend to manipulation. It's really just you sharing your worldview. I mean, we emulate or idolize some of these people. You think about professional athletes, and they talk about how they want to be the best. They got to be the best. They're working hard to be the best. I'm the best ever. And we think like, oh, those are, really successful athletes. So the problem isn't having an overinflated self-esteem, because really, truly, the narcissist does not, even though that's how it appears on the surface. Really, truly, the narcissist has a fragile self-esteem, or really a non-existent self-esteem. And that's what creates that false reality. So this article goes on what parents can do differently, and they talk about praising effort, not the talent or outcomes. And these are smart ideas. These are things that people have developed with the whole idea of I can't think of what the name of that thing is, but where you tell people, rather than practice makes perfect, practice makes improvement, meaning that we're not inherently good or bad at anything, but if we put effort in and try harder, we can improve. And that's really how life works. Growth mindset, that's what it is. These are all growth mindset things, valuable stuff. But to say that using growth mindset, or if you fail to use growth mindset, if you fail as a parent, you're going to suddenly create a narcissist, is really not the point. Really, if you are worried about creating a narcissist as a parent, the key, rather than rephrasing, instead of saying you're so smart to you worked hard on that, that's all great for growth mindset. But really, it's giving your kid authentic attention and care and nurturing. That's what will stop people from becoming narcissists, if they have that tendency, if they're born with a brain that will go in that direction. All right. Just wanted to share some of my thoughts on this. I'm really interested when I see stuff come up like in the pop media, like I was saying, about narcissists, because it's a catchphrase. Everybody's being labeled narcissist and so forth. And I think it's really important to parse through some of this stuff to really understand what's really going on here. So we're not just reactionarily like running around being afraid that all our kids are going to turn into narcissists just because we help boost their esteem and tell them how great and special they are. All right. Hope that was helpful. Make sure you subscribe, give some thumbs up, likes, comment below. What do you think about all this, what I'm saying here? All right. We'll see you next time.